Hey there, everyone. Today, I wanted to create a short video just to give you an example of negative externalities. Remember, an externality is an unintended consequence or side effect. It's um, it's something that happens when a private choice is made that affects society or other people who weren't involved in that private choice. And so we've talked about pollution being a great example of a negative externality. We can think about education being a positive externality. You choose to get an education for private reasons, but it helps society. You can think about your neighbor's decision to have a noisy party as a negative externality, or a beautiful yard as a positive externality. And so the idea is an individual makes a private choice, but there's a larger consequence to society. But it's a little bit of a weird concept. So we're going to do an example today of negative externalities with the market for gasoline. And the idea here is that by going through a numeric and graphic example, you'll get a better sense of exactly what we're talking about. So let's get started. We're going to be talking about the market for gasoline, which means we're going to start out by looking at the private costs and the private benefits associated with gasoline. And that's just how we think of markets in general, right? So remember, there is a demand curve that's downward sloping that shows the relationship between consumers' willingness to pay and quantity. As prices go down, consumers have a higher willingness to pay for this good. We'll also have a supply curve. The supply curve shows the relationship between a firm's costs and the quantity they're willing to sell. So as prices go up, firms will be willing and able to scale up production and sell more units. And so we can start out with numbers that look like this. There we go. So we have the private costs or the private price and the private benefit here. And we have the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded. And what we see is as price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. So at $5, people want 0 gallons of gasoline. At $4.50, they want 5. And then as the price continues to go down, the quantity demanded goes up. And that's that law of demand that we expect that as prices go up, people are going to want less of something. As prices go down, people will want more of it. On the other hand, firms are going to be more willing and able to supply goods to the market as prices go up. So when prices are very low, say 50 cents a gallon, firms will not be very willing to supply gasoline. Maybe only 1 or 2 firms can supply gasoline, so we're only going to see a few gallons on the market. But as prices go up, more and more firms are willing and able to supply more and more gasoline in the marketplace, peaking out at $5 and $50 a gallon. And so the first thing we do is we want to graph the demand curve, graph the supply curve, and find the equilibrium. And we'll find the equilibrium at that point where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. And so we can see right here, our equilibrium quantity is going to be 25 gallons of gas, and our equilibrium price is going to be $2.50. So let's go ahead and try to graph that realistically here. So we're going to do this in price and quantity space. So remember, we're always going to have price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. And I'm going to be going from $0 to $5. So I want to go ahead and scale that for myself. So let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess that's fine. $5, $4, down to 1. And then in terms of quantity, I'm going to be going by 5s from 0 to 45.50, we'll see. But the main thing I know from looking at my demand schedule and my supply schedule is that my equilibrium is at 25. And so I want to make sure I include that. So let's say this is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. That should be good enough. There we go. Now I can graph my supply and demand curves. And if you want, you can do this as precisely or as casually as you like. Really, the important thing is to understand the intuition behind this. So I'll start out with demand, which at a price of $5 is 0. But if I go through and look at the price at each 50-cent mark, I can see that when the price goes down to $4.50, demand goes up to 5 units. When price goes down to 4, demand comes up to 10. When price goes down to $3.50, demand goes up to 15. When price goes up to 3, or down to 3, demand goes up to 20. Price goes up to, or goes down to $2.50, then demand is going to go up to 25 units, and so on. This is a situation where graph paper is always really nice and helpful, but we do the best we can with what we have. So we're going to get a demand curve that kind of looks like that obeys that law of demand. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And you want to remember, demand is private benefit. This example is looking at negative externalities. We have positive externalities too. Positive externalities create a social benefit outside of private benefits, but that's a whole other issue. Today, we're just looking at negative externalities and that additional social cost. So if we want to look at social cost first, let's graph private cost, and that's going to be our supply curve. So our supply curve is going to be the opposite direction. Firms will not want to supply any gasoline at a price of $0. But at 50 cents, they'll do 5. At $1, they'll do 10. 1.50, 15. 2 is 20. 2.50 is 25. 3 is 30, and so on, all the way up to say $5 and 50 units. So this is going to be like this. So that's our supply curve. And like I said, we want to remember that the supply curve is the private costs. It's the cost that the gasoline company has to bear in order to provide gasoline to the market. Demand is private benefits. It's the benefit we as individuals get from buying gasoline, being able to go to work or whatever. Now we want to talk about the externality cost. We're going to assume in this market that the externality is going to be valued at $1 per gallon. And so what that's going to do is it's going to shift this supply curve up by $1. But let me show it to you mathematically first. Before I do that, I want to make sure I get my equilibrium, quantity, and price. So we can see here, when we look at private cost and private benefit, we get a market equilibrium quantity here. I'm gonna, let's see, just kind of market, right? That's our market equilibrium, price and quantity. What we'll see, is that the externality is gonna alter that for us. So let's put this back. Go. And now we want to add in the social cost per gallon of gasoline of $1. So we're going to see that this is going to shift the supply curve up by $1. So everywhere we have a price and a given quantity, we're going to see that price go up $1. So here we have 50 gallons is $5. Actually, the total externality cost associated with 50 gallons of gasoline is not just the $5 that it costs the firm, it's actually the private cost of $5 plus the externality cost of $1. So this is going to be $6. Here we have a private cost of $4.50. So the total cost, including the externality damage, is going to be $5.50. 4 becomes $5. $3.50 becomes $4.50, and so on. What we're doing is we're adding in the externality damage. So this is the cost of making gasoline and selling it on the market. This is that plus the environmental damage that gasoline creates, okay? And so it's going to be the private cost plus the externality damage. $3.50, $2, oops, $3. There we go, $2.50, $2 instead of $1, and $1.50. So now we have numbers for our private costs, our private benefits, our quantity demanded, our quantity supplied, but we have this new line to graph that represents the negative externality damage, the private cost and the social cost to society. And so the idea here is that the total true cost of gasoline is going to be that higher curve. That's the social cost, and it includes the private and the externality damage. And so now we see, if we compare our true cost, our true social externality cost of gasoline to demand, we have a new equilibrium right here. The new equilibrium is actually 20 gallons of gasoline and $3. That's what we call the socially optimal outcome. It's different from the private market outcome, and if it's a negative externality, it's going to be a smaller number and a higher price, because without taking into consideration the larger social cost, we're going to tend to overproduce this good. Does that make sense? So that's what this negative externality problem is going to do. It's going to be a market failure. The market produces the wrong quantity at the wrong price of gasoline. What we want to do is have, instead of 25 gallons of gas at $2.50 each, we want to produce 20 gallons of gas at $3 each. So how do we solve this market failure? Well, we can do command and control policies like limit gasoline sales, or we can do a market-based solution like a tax. If we tax gasoline by $1, now all of a sudden the cost is reflecting the true social cost. And that's a really nice way that economists like to solve that problem. So that's our example of a negative externality. Let me know what you think. Let me know what negative externalities you experience in your daily life and what ways you see them internalized. Thanks and have a great day.